X. She didn't say anything when she opened the door and found Celeste standing on the porch with a duffel bag and a garbage bag full of clothes. She just looked at her stepdaughter the way you look at a piece of furniture you're finally getting rid of. X. You have until 6, Nadine said. X. Celeste Adeyemi was 19 years old. She had $212 in a checking account, a backpack with her father's old field manual inside, and nowhere to go. It was February in Winnipeg. It was -23. X. She didn't cry. She picked up the garbage bag, slung the duffel over her shoulder, and walked down the front steps of the house on Elmwood Drive. The house her father had bought. The house her father had paid for. The house that somehow, in the 14 months since Daniel Adeyemi died, had become Nadine's house, Nadine's decision, Nadine's call. X. She walked 4 blocks to the Tim Hortons on Henderson and sat in a corner booth until a teenager behind the counter stopped refilling her coffee and started giving her looks. Then she called the only number she had memorized that wasn't her father's. X. Her aunt in Edmonton picked up on the second ring. X. Come, she said. That was it. Just come. X. Celeste spent $43 on a Greyhound ticket and arrived in Edmonton at 11:30 at night with her father's field manual pressed flat against her chest inside her jacket. She didn't know why she'd grabbed it. She didn't know why she held it like that, like it could stop something. Maybe she just needed something of his that Nadine hadn't touched. X. The field manual had belonged to Daniel Adeyemi when he was a corporal with the Royal Canadian Regiment. He'd been stationed in Petawawa, then Kandahar, then back to Petawawa. He'd written notes in the margins in his small, precise handwriting. Celeste used to read them as a kid, not understanding most of it, just liking that it felt like his voice. X. After he died of a heart attack at 51. Healthy, non-smoker, no warning. The manual was the one thing she'd grabbed before Nadine changed the locks. X. That's the part people always get stuck on. The locks. He'd been dead 11 months when Nadine changed them. Not the week after. Not the month after. 11 months, long enough that Celeste had started to think maybe it would be okay, maybe Nadine would settle, maybe the house would just become a place they both lived quietly and grieved separately and didn't bother each other. Then one Saturday in January, Celeste came back from her shift at the grocery store and her key didn't work. X. Nadine met her at the door and said she needed to make some changes. X. The changes, it turned out, were that Celeste needed to leave. X. She left. X. What Celeste found out later, much later, 5 years later, from a paralegal named Odette, who worked at a firm on Jasper Avenue and had a habit of being very precise when it mattered, was that Daniel had left a will. He'd drawn it up 8 months before he died, with a notary in Thunder Bay when he was visiting his brother. The will divided his estate evenly, half to Nadine, half to Celeste. The house was included. X. Nadine knew about the will. X. The notary had sent a copy to the house on Elmwood Drive. Nadine had signed for it. X. The estate lawyer Nadine hired, a man named Philip, who billed at $420 an hour and had a firm handshake and apparently very flexible ethics, had filed probate without ever notifying Celeste. She was a legal adult. She should have been contacted. She wasn't. X. By the time Celeste found this out, Nadine had sold the house on Elmwood Drive and bought a townhouse in Transcona. She had taken everything and spent almost all of it. X. But that's getting ahead of things. X. In Edmonton, Celeste slept on her aunt's couch for 4 months. Her aunt Roseline was a practical woman who worked in hospital administration and had very clear views about what distinguished temporary difficulty from permanent failure. She made Celeste enroll in upgrading courses. She made Celeste call Service Canada. She did not let Celeste spend more than 2 consecutive hours feeling sorry for herself, which was at times frustrating and in retrospect probably saved her. X. Celeste had applied to the Canadian Forces Reserve when she was 17. Her father had been quiet about it, not encouraging, not discouraging. He knew what it was. She'd done her basic training the summer before his death, had come home in August with better posture and the ability to disassemble a rifle in the dark. And her father had looked at her across the kitchen table and said, "You're going to be fine." She hadn't known what he meant at the time. X. She understood it now. X. In Edmonton, she parlayed her reserve training into a security job at a commercial property firm. She was good at it. Attentive, calm under pressure, didn't rattle. Within a year, she'd moved from overnight patrol to the firm's corporate security division. Within 2 years, she was managing a team. X. Within 3, she was completing a property management certificate at Nate on nights and weekends, partly because the firm offered tuition reimbursement, and partly because she had started to understand that property, who held it, who managed it, who had legal claim to it, was a language, and she wanted to be fluent. She lived carefully, spent less than she made, saved with a discipline that surprised even herself. Roseline used to say that Celeste treated her bank account like a military objective, incremental, consistent, no wasted energy. That wasn't wrong. The thing about being thrown out into a Winnipeg winter with a garbage bag full of your clothes is that it doesn't leave you, not in a way that breaks you, necessarily, but in a way that recalibrates what you're willing to accept and what you're not. Celeste became someone who checked her exits, who read the fine print, who understood that warmth and safety were not things that just existed around you. They were things you built, and you built them brick by brick, and you didn't let anyone else hold the deed. It was Odette who found the will. Odette Camara was a paralegal Celeste had met at a property management seminar in 2021, 4 years after leaving Winnipeg. They'd ended up at the same table during the lunch break, discovered they were both originally from Ontario, Odette from Sudbury, Celeste from Petawawa, and had kept in loose touch through the kind of LinkedIn connection that occasionally becomes something real. When Celeste mentioned offhand that her father had died without, as far as she knew, leaving a will, Odette had gone quiet in a particular way. What was the notary's name? She asked. Celeste didn't know, but she knew her father's brother's name, and she knew the city. It took Odette 3 weeks and 2 calls to Thunder Bay to find the notary. Retired now, living in Dryden, still had his records in banker's boxes in his garage because he'd never gotten around to digitizing anything. The will was exactly where he said it would be. The half of Daniel Adeyemi's estate that should have gone to his daughter had been worth, at the time of his death, approximately $230,000. The house had been the bulk of it, the house that Nadine had sold. Celeste sat with that number for a long time. She did not call Nadine. She did not send an email. She called a lawyer, a real one, not Philip, a woman in Winnipeg named Harriet who specialized in estate litigation and had, according to 3 separate reviews online, a particular dislike for probate fraud. Harriet's first words after reading the file were, "She signed for it." Her second words were, "Good." What followed was 14 months of legal proceedings that Celeste will tell you she does not recommend to anyone who values their peace of mind. There were depositions and counterclaims and a period of 3 weeks in the spring where it seemed like Philip might actually succeed in arguing that the notary's records were inadmissible due to a technicality involving the province of registration. He did not succeed. The records were admitted. The will was valid. The fraud was documented. During those 14 months, Celeste kept working, kept saving, started making offers on properties in Edmonton, small ones, a condo in Millwoods, a duplex in Clairview, nothing glamorous. She got a mortgage at 26 with the help of a broker who had been her supervisor at the security firm and who had seen enough of how Celeste operated to co-sign without hesitation. The properties were not glamorous. They were cash flow positive within 18 months. She did not tell anyone in Winnipeg what she was doing. Not because she was hiding it, just because it wasn't ready yet. Some things you don't announce, you just build them. The settlement came through on a Tuesday afternoon in October. Celeste was in her car outside a property inspection in St. Albert when Harriet called. Nadine had agreed, finally, after 14 months, to settle rather than go to trial. The fraud charge had not been stayed. Philip had lost his license to practice law in Manitoba in August, following a separate complaint from a different family that turned out to have a nearly identical story. When that happened, Nadine's new lawyer had advised her, in Harriet's words, to be realistic. Nadine was realistic. The settlement was not $230,000. With interest, legal costs, and the assessed value of the property at time of sale, it came to $418,000. Celeste sat in her car for a few minutes after hanging up. She wasn't crying. She wasn't celebrating. She was looking at a crack in the windshield she'd been meaning to get fixed and thinking about her father's handwriting in the margins of that field manual. Small, precise, deliberate. Always deliberate. She got out of the car and went inside to do the property inspection. The townhouse in Transcona where Nadine lived was a rental. Had been since she'd spent through most of the house sale proceeds and found herself needing to downsize again. The property management company that handled her building had sold their portfolio 18 months earlier to a growing Edmonton-based firm that specialized in residential acquisitions in the Prairie provinces. The firm's principal owner was 28 years old. Her name was Celeste Adeyemi. There are people who will tell you that this kind of thing doesn't happen in real life, that the timelines don't line up, that it's too neat. And they're not entirely wrong. There's luck in it. There's timing. There's the fact that a retired notary in Dryden had never gotten around to buying a shredder. But there's also 14 months of legal proceedings. There's 4 years of overnight security shifts and Saturday morning classes at N8. There's $212 in a checking account and a Greyhound ticket and an aunt who did not allow more than 2 hours of self-pity at a stretch. There's the part where you decide, somewhere in a Tim Hortons in Winnipeg in February, that the cold outside is not going to be the thing that defines you. The first time Celeste saw Nadine after the settlement was at the annual portfolio review meeting, which property managers were required to attend with their tenants' association representatives. Nadine was on the tenants' association. She'd joined the year before, apparently, because she had opinions about the snow removal contractor. Celeste arrived early. She sat at the head of the table. She was wearing a gray blazer and her father's watch, a Seiko automatic he'd bought himself after his second tour. Nothing expensive, just a thing he'd worn every day. She'd found it in the box of his personal effects that his regiment had returned after he died, the box Nadine had shoved into the storage locker and apparently forgotten about. She wore it because it told the time. That's what she would tell you if you asked. The meeting started. Names were called for the attendance sheet. When the rep reached Nadine's unit number, the rep looked up and said the name aloud. Nadine said, "Here." She hadn't looked at Celeste yet. She was looking at the agenda sheet on the table in front of her. Celeste said nothing. She waited. There's a moment, and if you've ever been in a room with someone who once had power over you and no longer does, you know this moment, where they look up and they see you and everything they thought they understood about the room rearranges itself. Doesn't take long. 2 seconds, maybe 3. The color leaves their face the way heat leaves a car in February. Fast, then faster. Nadine looked up. She saw Celeste. Celeste was already looking at the next item on the agenda. Snow removal, Celeste said. I understand there were some concerns last winter about response times. Let's start there. She didn't look at Nadine for most of the meeting, not because she was avoiding it, just because there wasn't anything she needed from that direction. The snow removal issue was resolved. New contractor, better response window, documented in writing. 2 other building maintenance items were addressed. The meeting ran 45 minutes and ended on time. Afterward, in the parking lot, Nadine caught up with her. Celeste. Celeste stopped. She turned around. Nadine looked older. Not dramatically, just settled into something that didn't sit well on her. She was wearing a coat Celeste didn't recognize. Her hair was shorter. She had the look of someone who had spent a long time waiting for a different outcome. I didn't know you were, Nadine started. The property management information is in your lease package, Celeste said. If you have concerns about your unit, you can contact the office. The number's on the website. Nadine opened her mouth, closed it. The snow removal issue will be corrected before December, Celeste added. You'll get a written notice. She turned and walked to her car. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel vindicated. Exactly. Vindication had come 14 months earlier with a phone call from Harriet and $418,000, and the knowledge that Philip would never do to another family what he had done to hers. This wasn't vindication. This was something quieter. This was just Tuesday. She sat in the car. She adjusted her father's watch on her wrist. It was running about 30 seconds fast. She kept meaning to have it regulated, but she didn't, really, because she liked that it was slightly ahead. Like it was already somewhere she was still getting to. She drove back to the office. She had 3 more property inspections that week, a meeting with her mortgage broker on Thursday, and a call with Harriet on Friday about a separate estate case that Harriet had asked for a reference on. She had things to do. Somewhere behind her in the parking lot of a townhouse in Transcona, Nadine was still standing. Celeste didn't look back. She never had needed to. I keep thinking about that Seiko watch. The one Celeste found in a box of her father's effects, not valuable by any measure, just worn and slightly fast, running 30 seconds ahead of actual time. She wore it to that property management meeting. She didn't make a speech about it. She didn't explain it. She just wore it and moved on to the snow removal agenda item, and that, honestly, is the whole story in one small detail. There's a version of this where Celeste shows up to that meeting angry, where she's been storing the anger for 10 years like fuel, and she finally gets to use it. I understand that version. When someone takes what your father left you, when they sign for the will and say nothing and let you walk out into a Winnipeg February with a garbage bag, anger is the reasonable response. It's the human response. But Celeste didn't run on anger. She ran on something steadier. She ran on the understanding that what happened to her was wrong, that it could be documented, that documentation had consequences, and that the most useful thing she could do was become someone who knew how to use that process. She studied. She saved. She hired Harriet. She let the system do what the system, when properly engaged, is actually capable of doing. That's not luck. That's a kind of intelligence that doesn't get talked about enough. The intelligence of knowing which battles are yours to fight directly and which ones you hand to the right people and let run their course. Philip lost his license, not because Celeste confronted him in a parking lot, because Odette found a retired notary in Dryden with banker's boxes in his garage, and Harriet knew what to do with what was inside them. Celeste understood that the truth, properly documented, is its own weapon. She just had to be patient enough to let it land. The part that stays with me, though, is the integrity of how she handled the ending. She could have made Nadine feel small. She had every right to. Instead, she told her the snow removal issue would be corrected before December and walked to her car. Not because she was suppressing anything, because there was genuinely nothing left to say. The work had been done. The record had been corrected. Her father's watch was on her wrist, running slightly ahead, and she had 3 more property inspections that week. That's what actual strength looks like, I think. Not the dramatic version where you deliver a speech to the person who wronged you. The quiet version where you've already built something real, and the confrontation, when it finally comes, is just a Tuesday afternoon item on a longer agenda. Celeste didn't set out to become her stepmother's landlord. She set out to survive a Winnipeg winter with $200 and somewhere to be. Everything that followed was just the result of decisions made one at a time, over years. To learn, to save, to trust the right people, to keep going on the days when keeping going was the only available option. Her father wrote in the margins of a field manual in small, precise handwriting. She carried it across the country in her jacket pressed against her chest. I don't think she carried it because she had a plan. I think she carried it because it was the one thing that still felt like him. She figured out the rest herself.